that have borrowed dollars in the international markets have no way of doing it. They can have swap lines that go to the existing banks in these other countries, but there's no guarantee the banks will lend to the corporates who need it. You see, these problems are everywhere. We've also then hit COVID, and COVID was like that 2008 moment or the European moment 2012, where everything stopped and all of the trends hyper-accelerated. The trend I'm more interested in was really the trend of governments having to use central banks to backstop them to create enormous fiscal stimulus. So we've seen the largest fiscal stimulus by any measure the world has ever seen. And basically the central banks have printed money to allow it to happen. Now, most of us knew this was coming, but the scale of it has been shocking. And it's not finished yet. I think COVID is around for a lot longer than people realize. And the situation in Europe is only going to get worse, and I think the US will too. And it's going to require more and more stimulus. I'm not entirely sure how the Europeans are going to keep hold of their banking system in the middle of this. And I've feared for a long time it may end up getting nationalized. But against that backdrop of this extreme situation where governments really can't print more money because they just have constraints within their parliamentary systems, and yet central banks are telling them they need to do more and we'll try and backstop you. This is an awkward situation that nobody knows how to deal with, but the central banks are pushing to say we need more. So then we start getting the ECB talking about a central bank digital currency, a digital euro or e-euro. Well, that's interesting. Why are they doing that? Next was the IMF, out this week, papers about digital currencies. Then we've seen it from the Department of Justice in the US. We've seen it from the agreement in the US for certain banks to custody Bitcoin and other digital assets, allowing them to come into the system. We've seen a whole bunch of these things, and the IMF tomorrow on Monday, so by the time you see this, will have had a speech about this, a whole panel, including Jay Powell. The Cleveland Fed has written about it, and many others. People are talking about it everywhere. The drumbeat is getting louder. They're going towards central bank digital currencies. So what does that mean? Surely currencies are digital now anyway. I mean, you can pay with your credit card, you can transfer money. Well, this is very different. Right now, to transfer money, you go through the banking system. Digital currencies are the central banks operating directly to you. So you have an account with a digital wallet with the central bank. So why do you need banks, do you ask? Well, I'll come on to that in a bit too. It's a complicated world and we don't quite know where it's going. But okay, so we've got the central bank digital currency. And if you see the nice fluffy way the IMF have dressed it up, it's, well, we've got a cross-border payments platform so you don't have to use those awful wire transfer systems. Yes, but it also means that people don't need the SWIFT transfer system, which is what creates the backbone of the US dollar. Now, I'm not dollar bearish yet, and I think it will morph into that. I'm actually still extremely dollar bullish. We'll come on to the dollar a bit more in due course as well. But when we look at this, they're trying to create payment rails, so they say, and that's great. We need to be able to just instantly transfer from our mobile phone from one person to another. I can send money to my mum in Spain, she gets it instantaneously, like it works for Bitcoin. Beautiful. But that's not the only reason. As I said, SWIFT is another big reason. The reason why people like China want to get off the SWIFT payment system and the global monetary system based around the US dollar. But before that comes this idea of central banks and fiscal policy. We've run out of monetary policy. Rates are zero or negative in most countries. I believe rates will go negative in the US by the end of this COVID recession. I think it goes on longer than people expect. People are familiar with my unfolding thesis where I think we go into a insolvency phase as growth doesn't materialize as people expect, even with some stimulus coming after the election. You see, central banks want to be able to give people money directly, direct monetization. They can't do that right now. Right now, they print money, it goes into the banking system, the banks hoard it because we're going through a credit crunch. So that's very typical action.